So I would like to switch gear and actually invite, our guest speaker, Lisa Chu from Advancing Justice California, to do a quick training on legislative advocacy. So we did prepare 2 trainings today on legislative advocacy and effective lobbying, but unfortunately, we're running out of time, and we do want to, just not rush things through. So for the second training, we'll actually reschedule that for a future call with having our say. So today we would just dive into legislative advocacy with Lisa, and then we have Joel doing Spanish interpretation. So we will be doing consecutive Spanish interpretation during this training. So just, folks, just be patient while our speaker and our interpreting staff are, navigating this training. So I'm going to invite Lisa to hop onto the call.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Great. Thank you so much, Wayu, and thank you, Joel, for speaking in tandem. I did prepare a longer presentation, but I'm going to shorten it to what is more relevant for today, as well as to keep in mind the time. So we can go on to the next slide. First, I want to break down what the legislature looks like, and I apologize. I do hear an echo, so if there's somebody that can mute. I want to break down what the legislature looks like, and I apologize. I know some of you have more experience and some have less in working in the Capitol, but hopefully this provides a baseline for all of us to work off of. So the state government is broken into 3 branches. Today we're talking about the legislative branch that turns ideas into laws. Ultimately, we will have to discuss the governor's role in creating a law as well. But the first step is to go through the legislature. And the legislature is broken down into the Assembly and the Senate. So on the Senate, I won't read everything, but there are 40 senators who represent our entire state. So that's how the state, that map shows how the state is broken up into 40 Senate districts. And each district has a constituency of about 1 million people. So every senator is tasked with leading and speaking on behalf of 1 million constituents. And the leader of the Senate is a person from the majority party who is elected by the party, called the Senate President Pro Tem. Next slide. So,
okay, Lisa, 1 second.
Oh, yeah. Sorry.
Oh, yeah. Sorry.
Okay.
So, Joel, feel free to, yeah, go ahead.
Okay, muy buenos días. En este momento está hablando Lisa Chu de una organización comunitaria que se llama Advancing Asian Americans Advancing Justice LA. Esa presentación antes fue más larga, pero nada más voy a repasar las cosas que son relevantes a nuestra conversación. Estamos hablando sobre el proceso legislativo. En verdad, el gobierno aquí en los Estados Unidos tiene 3 ramas, que es la rama ejecutiva, la de los juicios, pero en este momento estamos hablando de la legislatura. Aquí en California, parte de esa legislatura es el Senado, como se muestra en la pantalla. Aquí existen 4 miembros del Senado, cada uno que viene de un distrito que es más o menos una población de 1 millón de personas. También el líder del Senado se llama el President Pro Tem o el Presidente Pro Tempore. Eso quiere decir que es parte del partido mayoraria. Y el liderazgo para el Senado viene de alguien que está elegido entre ellos.
Okay, and over to the next slide. The Assembly is the second house. This one is broken down further, so you can see the map is more broken down. There are 80 Assembly members that represent the state, and they represent about 500,000 people per district. and the leader of the assembly is called the Assembly Speaker.
La segunda cámara de la legislación se llama la Asamblea. Se puede ver que los distritos están más chicas. En total, la Asamblea tiene 80 miembros. Cada uno puede estar elegido en su oficio para un término de 2 años, y cada distrito está basado en la población también. Más o menos 500,000 de personas viven por cada distrito, y el líder de la asamblea se llama el speaker o el discursante, para traducirlo, pues básicamente, de la asamblea.
Great, and on the next slide, I wanted to provide everyone, because you'll be getting these slides via email, that this link will lead you to a website where you can find who's representing you. So wherever you live, you have an assembly member who represents you and a senator who represents you. And then I wanted to introduce everyone to the idea that the people who represent you, your legislators, accept letters and emails to their offices. You can visit their offices near you, and you can also visit their office in the state capitol in Sacramento if you are in Sacramento, and you can call them. And the most powerful advocacy tool that we will be talking about today is hearing, well, not talking about today specifically, but hearing from constituents is a very powerful way to influence our legislators to vote on the things we need them to vote on. And we'll be discussing today different ways to get that to happen.
En esa pantalla quiero que todo el mundo vea quién es la persona quien representa el distrito donde usted vive. Entonces vas a ver este enlace para un sitio de red. En cualquier momento usted puede pasar a ese sitio de red para buscar el legislador que es para su distrito. Una idea muy importante que quisiera que todo el mundo tenga, que cada legislador acepta las cartas, las visitas en persona a su oficina o en su distrito o en Sacramento, el Capitolio. También ellos reciben los correos electrónicos, los emails, y también las visitas si pueden, pero lo más importante es que cuando ellos pueden oír sus constituyentes o los votantes de su distrito, eso es la acción más poderosa que una persona puede hacer en ese proceso.
Oh, Lisa, we can't hear you.
Oh, and on the next slide, we're breaking down the state into 2 parties. Everybody has heard of Democrats and Republicans, right? And you can see how it's broken down in our state. There are 29 Democrats in the Senate, 11 Republicans in the Senate, 61 in the Assembly, and 19 Republicans in the Assembly. This doesn't just mean that the Senate and the Assembly have majorities. This means they have super majorities. Not just over half of the houses are Democratic, but over 2/3 of both of the houses are Democratic. This means that, there is further distinction within such a large party, the Democratic Party in our state, that in both the Senate and the Assembly, there are different little cohorts that have been formed. And you can think of that informally as a progressive cohort within the Democratic Party that is more left-leaning, meaning more liberal, and obviously progressive in nature and catered and angled towards social justice and equity issues, and then a more moderate Democratic branch, and moderate Democrats are those who can be related to more old school Democratic Party ideals.
Okay, entonces el sistema de gobierno aquí en los Estados Unidos es más o menos un sistema con dos partidos. Aquí en California el Senado tiene 29 demócratas y 11 republicanos. La Asamblea tiene 61 demócratas y 19 republicanos. Eso quiere decir que entre los partidos, los demócratas no solamente son la mayoría, pero se considera un super mayoría. Eso quiere decir que hay diferenciación entre los partidos. Hay los que tienen perspectivas distintas, que se puede decir que son grupos que son o más progresivo o los que son más moderados. Los que son más progresivos se consideran más liberal, más izquierdista y más atado a los conceptos de la justicia social.
So the next two slides are for your reference. They list the leadership of the Senate, the Assembly. We can go on to leveraging your political power. And so please skip ahead.
Esa pantalla. Oh, excuse me, Liz.
That's all right.
Esa pantalla.
Let's skip ahead to slide 20, and then Joel can translate that.
Okay. Las pantallas que ves son nada más para su propia referencia. Son los nombres y los oficios del liderazgo para el Senado y después para la Asamblea.
Okay, so if we could go to slide 20, I want to talk about leveraging your political power. So all of you on this call, I can see there are 31 individuals from several organizations. Your organization has political power. It may not, it may require that you work within a coalition or work with lobbyists. But today I want to walk you through what it looks like to convert an idea into a law. And I hope that through this training, you can understand what it takes so that you can make the correct partnerships, so that you can think along the right lines to actualize the needs in your community. So when we begin on the next slide, every law begins with an idea. And so, let's see, is there a slide before that one? Oh, how weird. I have a slide. But that's okay. We can stay on the lobbying power slide, and I'll just explain the slide I have. When you're thinking about an idea to turn into a law, obviously this has to be a great need, right, that the law does not already address. And so we want to ask ourselves questions like, what is the change we wish to see in the world? You ask yourself, who is feeling the pain? Who is inflicting the pain, and what can be done? Other similar questions would be, what is the status quo right now, and who benefits from the status quo, but who is harmed by the status quo? And then ultimately, well, what institutions, ideas, or organizations are colluding towards the status quo, and how can I get them to change? Finally, I want to note that as you're generating ideas, you want to make sure that it's relevant. Linda and others just spoke to the fact that this year, all of our eyes are turned toward COVID-19, and now policy and budget considerations have to be relevant to COVID-19. Every other year is similar, maybe less focused, but we always have to ask, is this concept relevant? Is it relevant to the world, to the nation, or at least to the state or on the local level? And who cares? Who will care enough to fight alongside us on this who cares to preserve the status quo as well. And then, and yeah, I'll let Joel translate that first.
Okay, entonces en esta sección queremos destacar exactamente cómo usted puede manejar el poder político que o tenga usted o a la organización con que usted trabaja. Entonces, estamos hablando sobre cómo convertirse una idea hasta llegar a la legislación. En esa pantalla discutimos un poco sobre el poder que tienen los que trabajan en los grupos de interés, que también eso que en inglés se llama el lobby, puede ser una manera de trabajar con los legisladores para su apoyo o para oponer los proyectos legislativos y hacerlo por medio de las organizaciones que trabajan para los clientes. También es importante enfocarse en cuál relevante eso puede ser, si es relevante para la nación, el estado, o hasta para el distrito en donde uno vive. En ese momento, debido a la coronavirus, la COVID-19 es algo muy importante. Entonces, en cada comunicación con los legisladores, es muy importante que enfocamos en decir si es relevante a la coronavirus, haciendo que eso es algo que está pues a la mente de todo el mundo y en términos de el gobierno, cada cosa que uno quisiera sacar para el apoyo tiene que estar relevante y atado a este asunto.
Okay, and this slide has been up for a while. I know that folks have had a chance to view it already, but I want to highlight the power of lobbying in Sacramento. Ideas are converted into bills, and bills go through a process to become law up in Sacramento. And so even if you are working within an organization that's not in Sacramento or Northern California, if you have lobbying power in Sacramento, then you can really see your vision through. It's made a lot more difficult if you don't have somebody, at least one person up in Sacramento, making the key meetings, setting up conversations, and building relationships that really help in the policy process. So, once again, lobbyists work with legislators to sponsor, support, or even oppose bills on behalf of their clients. And many of our partner organizations and organizations within our various coalitions have lobbyists. Linda and I are examples of two people who do this as our full-time work, and we not only represent our clients, but any of the coalitions that we are a part of. So be sure to leverage lobbying if you are working on a bill that you want to turn into law.
Entonces, es muy importante pues saber lo crítico que son los lobbies o las personas que representan los grupos de interés, porque están representando o su organización o también coaliciones. Eso es algo que hace Liz con su organización y en CPAN es algo que hace Linda. Tienen esa presencia allá en Sacramento que es muy clave porque es la persona que trabaja como lobbyist sería la persona con quien uno puede esperar las reuniones directas con los legisladores. También alguien que puede fomentar y nutricionar una relación muy clave con los que sí tienen el poder.
You're doing such an amazing job, Joel. I could never do this in Vietnamese. The next slide is about coalition power. And you're all, so familiar with the power of a coalition. You are in the Having Our Say Coalition, for example, and very likely in the Health for All Coalition as well. There are many coalitions across all of the issue areas, and coalitions meet, regularly in order to share intel, build power together, come up with bill ideas together. And so I just want to highlight that in order to get an idea ultimately to become a law, you want to think about these things, asking yourself the right questions, harnessing lobbying power, and harnessing a coalition.
Entonces, otra parte de eso es que realmente queremos apreciar lo que es el poder de las coaliciones. Todo el mundo que está participando en esta llamada es parte de una coalición, Having Our Say. También muchos de nosotros son parte de la coalición Health for All. Es que las coaliciones lo que puedan hacer es compartir la información entre las organizaciones y también es una manera de amplificar el poder que tienen el representante lobbies, que es la persona dedicada a los grupos de interés para hacer representación. Y también es una manera que colectivamente podemos amplificar nuestros esfuerzos.
Okay, and the next slide is one that I'd really like for everybody to internalize. If there's one slide that's the most important today, it's this one, because this is what the process looks like. For an idea to be signed into law, the idea has to begin somewhere. And so I've listed all the, just a few of the potential sources of an idea, whether it's an individual who feels a certain pain that the law is not addressing or the law overlooks, or a body of research or a research institution, community group I've listed, as well as a legislator. The very person that's elected to represent our interests can be the person who has access to a lot of voices in their district and hear them out and develop an idea that addresses what they're hearing as concerns or pain points in their community. So anyone can create an idea, but when that idea, for an idea to turn into a bill, a legislator has to take on that idea. And so either an assembly member or a senator can take on the bill idea and then run a bill. The assembly member or the senator, who I'll refer to as, the legislator, because that's either assembly or senator, they will introduce a bill. It'll have a bill number. So you've seen bill numbers like AB4 or SB29. And with this bill, they have to present it in committees and get it to pass through committees. And they have a very lengthy and rigorous process by which they do that. So under the bill section, I've listed that, you start with either an assembly or a Senate bill, depending on who chose to author that bill. And then you first have to go through the first house. This is also called the House of Origin. If it was an assembly bill, the first house is the assembly. If it was a Senate bill, the first house is the Senate. And in the first house, you go through a process called the committee process. Let's say for this coalition, we work a lot on health issues, right? So if you have a bill to do with extending health care to a certain population, the bill will be referred to committees that are relevant to that bill. So very likely it would be referred to the Health Committee. And so when I say the committee process, this means that the bill has to go to the Health Committee, and the author of the bill has to present the bill, and then the members of that committee have to vote to approve the bill. Almost every bill has a certain cost associated with it, and so for bills that have a cost associated with it, they have to go to a committee called the Appropriations Committee. So think about your bill idea or your future bill idea and anticipate that it will be assigned to committees that are under its issue area, whether that's banking and finance or agriculture or health, as I mentioned, or education. Not only does the bill have to go through, the relevant committees, which can be one or more committees, but if it is going to cost the state money, it also has to go through the Appropriations Committee at the very end. The Appropriations Committee is where every bill that has a cost associated to it is considered all at once. And the chair of that committee and the entire makeup of that committee has a really large task to consider, what percentage of all of these bills can be done this year, that we can afford this year. And so it's a painful committee at the same time, because this means a lot of bills die here, and their process ends when they cannot be voted out of a committee. Ultimately, in every committee and at any step along the way, a bill can be amended. And I want to, make sure that this is well defined for people who don't have experience in this space, that amending a bill means that you're changing something about it. You're literally striking out certain words and you're adding in new words, so that, maybe a bill used to apply to a lot of people, but now we're going to amend it so it applies to a smaller population. By doing that, maybe the implementation's easier, maybe it costs less money, but amendments typically are carving down a bill. Sometimes amendments can change the nature of a bill too, but basically, the term amendments is referring to when you fix a bill, when you change it. And at any step along the process, in each committee, there is an opportunity for outside influences to amend your bill. So, so I've listed that under the first house, we go through the committee process. We have to get voted out of every committee that we're assigned to, and don't forget the Appropriations Committee. Take note that this is where your bill idea may change a little bit, and you have to grapple with what you're willing and not willing to change about your bill in order to keep it alive. And then ultimately, if you can pass through all committees, then the bill lands on the floor. The floor is where all of the members of that house meet at least twice a week in order to vote on bills that they want to pass out of their house and send to the next house. And so with our example, we're pretending we have an assembly bill, and our assembly bill has passed through all of the committees, so now it's on the assembly floor. You'll remember that the assembly has 80 members, and so we need at least 41 of the 80 members to vote for the bill to pass it, and that's, half of the members plus one. And then really quickly, I'll just, iterate that after, if you are to pass through the floor of the first house, then the bill successfully goes on to the second house. The second house is, the house that it didn't start in. And so our assembly bill would then go over to the Senate. And then on the Senate, you do the exact same thing all over again, but with the senators this time. So I hope I've laid it out in a way that makes clear how rigorous that process is for an idea to become a bill and for that bill to survive. Ultimately, if you get through the second house, you've passed through all the committees, you've passed through the Appropriations Committee of that house as well, and then you pass through the Senate floor with 21 out of 40 votes at least, then the bill goes on to the governor's desk. And this is where the bill has successfully passed through the legislative branch of the government and is now sitting on the governor's desk. The governor is, of course, the head of the executive branch, and the head of the executive branch has 30 days from when the bill passes the legislature to sign, veto, or do nothing on the bill. If the governor signs the bill, I think we're all aware and would be really happy to hear about our initiatives getting signed, because that means that the bill passes into law and it's on the books and it's part of California law from here on out. If the governor vetoes the bill, that means that he has decided to decline the work of the legislature in enacting it, and it does not become law. And nothing before that matters because the bill is not realized as law. And then the governor can do nothing. And this one is less talked about, but after 30 days, if the governor does nothing, the bill becomes a law. It just doesn't have his approval. Yeah. Good luck, Joel, and thank you.
Okay, entonces esa pantalla aquí es algo que quiero que todo el mundo capte. Es el proceso de cómo una idea se convierte en una ley. Primeramente, en esta columna de las ideas pueden empezar de cualquier persona o organización. Una individual puede decir que me siento dañado por algo que está pasando y quisiera otra legislación. Pero la idea también puede surgir de la investigación, de la comunidad, de una organización comunitaria o una organización sin fines de lucro, o una organización que es no gubernamental. También eso puede llegar de una empresa, del mercado privado o de un legislador, que puede ser un miembro de la asamblea, un senador o uno de los personal de sus oficinas. Después de ser idea, ahora hemos llegado al proyecto legislativo. Entonces, eso puede estar introducido como un proyecto legislativo de la Asamblea o del Senado. Entonces, si empieza en la Asamblea sería la primera Cámara o la Cámara de origen. También lo opuesto si empieza en el Senado. Después, en su primera Cámara, tiene que estar sometido al proceso comité. Por ejemplo, si estamos intentando hacer una ley que está relatado al acceso a la salud, entonces ese proyecto legislativo va a estar primeramente discutido en la Comité de Acceso a la Salud. Después, existe la potencial que pueden ser amendments o modificaciones. Y después, los que están en el comité tienen que votar para que pasara el proyecto legislativo al próximo turno. Después de eso, pasa a la segunda Cámara, que de nuevo está sometido bajo el proceso de comité. Existen modificaciones y después pasa a la Cámara completa para una votación. Después de pasar todo ese proceso y ir adelantando, el proyecto legislativo va al mostrador del gobernador. Aquí tiene 30 días desde cuando el proyecto fue pasado en la segunda Cámara. Durante ese tiempo, él puede firmarlo para hacerlo ley, o puede denegarlo o simplemente no hacer nada. Si el gobernador no hace ninguna cosa con ese proyecto legislativo, después de 30 días se convierte automáticamente en legislación. La única cosa es que no tiene el apoyo directo del gobernador.
All right, so I'd like to jump forward past this slide, past the next one, and onto this one. Yeah. The PowerPoint will be provided to everyone, and if you're reading through bullet points and you have any questions, I'd really love to provide my contact information after this presentation so you can ask more questions. But we'll jump forward to be mindful of time, that when you're advocating, basically, and you have a bill in the legislature, you must identify 3 pretty core groups, and maybe it's 4, but I'll say that there are some members who will already agree with you. Maybe you're working on a very interesting health bill, and you know there are members who are doctors, who are members that come from the communities that you come from, and they understand those needs. They're gonna vote for your bill. So those already agree with you. Secondly, you have members who can be persuaded. Maybe their constituency is not the same as yours, and you need to inform them of the needs of your community and why it's different from theirs, but it's still important as a state. Or, you know, people who are a little more skeptical need more background and more research that you can provide for them before they can vote yes on your bill. And then thirdly, you have members who are what I call difficult. This means that, you know, despite wanting to support your efforts, they don't seem to have a voting history that supports similar efforts, or despite taking meetings with you, you're not really convincing them. These members are difficult and sometimes a really big focus of our work. And then if there was a 4th category, there would be just members that will never agree with you, right? And because of their background or their education or their communities, they just cannot or will not vote for your bill. When lobbying, when counting the votes that we can get for a bill, we usually don't waste too much time on the people that will never support our policies. We focus a lot on, you know, the B and the C, the people who we can persuade, and then, you know, grabbing maybe a couple from the C category.
Entonces, hablando del proceso de la abogacía, es importante que identificamos a los miembros de la legislación que tienen distintas perspectivas y hacer categorías de estas perspectivas. Entonces, existen los miembros que ya están de acuerdo con su posición. La segunda serían los miembros que tú sabes pueden ser persuadidos a lo que será su legislación. La tercera son los que son difíciles, es decir, que posiblemente no tienen un récord de votación que es algo que apoya esa legislación o esa perspectiva. O posiblemente los que sí antes han tenido una cita, pero no parece que están inclinados a hacer lo que sería algo para apoyar esa legislación. Si fuera una 4ª categoría, yo diría que son los que jamás están de acuerdo con su posición. Y para nosotros enfocamos más en las primeras 2 categorías.
Okay, and then to round up the presentation, I want to skip to the slide titled Advice to Community Organizations. And again, as you review the ones we're not going over, please feel free to reach out to me if you have questions. One more slide down is the Advice to Community Organizations. So it's very important as you develop a bill idea that you build the proper relationships so that you have as much backing as possible, especially for, a single organization representing, just one area of California. It's important to build relationships with, say, organizations across the state or organizations that that serve different or similar communities. And before you really push forward with a bill idea, it's important to educate the stakeholders on your issues. So educate your community on the issue, educate your local government on the issues, and make sure that, especially in this day and age, there are resources available to people who want to know more. So you have a website, or you have handouts or materials, or just basic talking points that ambassadors of your organization or your cause can use to really educate the masses on the issue. And then this slide I sort of made as like a catch-all. So the bullet point about championing, who will champion your cause, is kind of selecting the right legislator to champion your cause. Again, if we're working on a health issue, we might want to look at the legislators in the legislature who are doctors, maybe, or who campaigned on a platform for children or for preventative care or for the elderly, for example. You want to find people who already have a passion for the subject so they can really carry that weight in those rooms where they're the only person who is championing your cause. And then on the point about leveraging your political power, we've already gone through the importance of presence in Sacramento, building a coalition. Nobody can pass a bill all alone, or at least that's very, very difficult. And especially for our grassroots organizations and organizations representing the most underserved Californians, we have to work together. And so I hope you take home knowledge that, we're not alone in this work, and coalitions like Having Our Say is really amazing, because this is the exact forum where things begin to concepts turn into actual bills that can turn into actual laws that help real people. And then, somebody's doorbell. Under leveraging your political power, of course, prioritize the funding required for this work. So this is funding, activism in Sacramento, funding traveling so that you can get impacted stories told at the Capitol during hearings. And then finally, you want to work within the policy process. A lobbyist will always be a great resource for keeping you on track, but the policy process is a very strict, deadline-oriented process that you cannot skip a beat on. And so, note who you need to meet with early on. I have just breezed through what the policy process looks like, but every single committee has staff that you have to meet with before you present your bill in that committee. Ultimately, every bill is the responsibility on the state to implement, and so you have to think about which state departments or agencies are going to be responsible for implementing, executing this vision you have, and meet with them to make sure that they're sharing with you what that would look like or what their problems with it would be. And then let's see here. I made notes on social media. In this day and age, I rarely see a successful bill without a strong social media game. And so building out a toolkit for many, many other organizations and activists to use is very powerful. Pre-writing scripts for phone calls, emails, letters of support, or even tweets is very helpful, and you want to get a lot of voices inundating the people who are going to vote on this bill, inundating the governor who ultimately needs to sign this bill. And so think about resources in that direction as well. And then, the last point here is you want to be prepared for the journey of a bill. It's very difficult for, a concept to pass the way it was born. Oftentimes, there are many, many amendments that are pushed upon the bill by other members of the legislature who can't vote for it unless you take a certain amendment, or opposition, meaning other organizations that don't want to see your bill passed, will come in and talk to legislators about, amendments that they want to see to oftentimes weaken a bill. And you have to be prepared to stomach that, or at least to question what you're willing to pass or not pass. And so I hope that today's presentation wasn't too lofty, and I want individual organizations to take home a message that in coordination with lobbyists and coalitions, we can get a lot of work done. And the pain that you see in your community is not unnoticed. If you speak up about it and we work together on it, we can actually get, an idea turned into a law. It's a hard process and requires some pooled resources, but we can definitely do it. And then if we skip forward after Joel's translation, the very last slide on my end is, it doesn't have my email, but it should. So I'm sure that WayU can provide my email. I hope that all of you see me as a resource. I work at Asian Americans Advancing Justice California. We're part of this coalition, and many others that are civil rights based. And so if you have any questions, please let me know.
Okay, WayU, can you go back to, yes, thank you. Entonces, para terminar la discusión, aquí están deletreados unos puntos muy importantes que son un consejo para las organizaciones comunitarias. Primeramente, sé el paisaje político, es decir, queremos saber con quién edificar relaciones, queremos estar pues muy educados en los asuntos y también queremos identificar quién será el campeón para nuestra causa. Después podemos manejar nuestro poder político. Es decir, podemos construir coaliciones de organizaciones como Having Our Say, porque sabemos que esas coaliciones pueden amplificar el volumen de su mensaje. Crea una estructura y asegúrese de tener una presencia en Sacramento. Busca miembros de grupos de interés que están dentro de la misma coalición que su organización. También haz prioridad que ustedes tengan los fondos, los recursos monetarios necesarios para organizar y también para viajar para hacer ese trabajo de abogacía. Finalmente, trabaja con el proceso de la policía o el proceso político. Eso quiere decir que es muy importante que enfocamos en estar preparados. También que es un proceso que tarda mucho, que tienen muchos cambios de vía y puede ser uno que es muy duro para mantenerse pendiente. Pero de todos modos, acuerdan que el dolor que se sienten en nuestras comunidades no es algo que no se ha notado y también si quieren pueden avanzar una idea hasta llegar a ser una ley. En la otra pantalla no aparece mi dirección de correo electrónico, pero por favor hable con WayU. Porque quiero proporcionarme como un recurso para todo el mundo y si quieren me pueden contactar directamente después de esa presentación.
Thank you so much. I want to just say thank you to both Lisa and Joel for pulling through this presentation, and thank you for everyone that stayed on the call. I know that we're almost 10 minutes over time, but wanted to, reassure that we'll be sending out the slides, the contact information, the notes that we took. We also recorded the session, so we'll break it down and, you know, post online so folks can revisit the content. And I think we'll talk again in April. There's a lot of information that we captured today that we want to take back to our team and process, and, you know, we need to figure out the strategy moving forward. And I will be sure to keep you all posted, and we'll keep in touch with each other via emails until next time we talk in April. Unfortunately, yeah, we won't have time to take questions, but if you do have questions, reach out to me. I'll be your funnel. I'll be your coordinator to, you know, send these questions to different folks that can answer the questions. But yeah, thank you so much. And everybody take a lunch break or take a walk. I know you're walking from home, but be sure to take care of yourself. And, you know, Stephen team is here with you, and we'll connect.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you, everybody, and thank you, Wei. Thank you, organizers.
Thank you, thank you, everyone. Bye.
Thank you all so much for joining.
Thank you.